When one thinks of the monsters of the movies from the 1930s and 1940s, two names come to mind for me. One, Bela Lugosi, who of course portrayed brilliantly the Count Dracula, and Boris Karloff, who played Frankenstein, the Mummy, and so many other unforgettable monsters of the horror movies. I found the following feature in a copy of Mad Monsters of Filmland, actually, of 1960, and it was simply titled The Boris Karloff Story, and I would like to share this with you. On November 23rd, 1887, a child was born in the perennial fog of London, England. The tiny boy was named Charles Edward, and his family name was Pratt. Charles Edward Pratt grew up in London town, and neither he or his family and friends had any idea that the Gentile, well-bred youngster would ever become a symbol of horror and madness to a generation of theater-goers. The young man attended Uppingham King's College and became interested in the theater. And it wasn't until he was in his late 20s that Charles E. Pratt, later to be known as Boris Karloff, came to America, and thousands of horror movie fans will agree that England's loss was most certainly America's gain. His first picture in America was for Columbia and was titled The Criminal Code, in which he played a gangster bit part. The same year, 1931, he made Five Star Final for First National, later becoming Warner Brothers. This was also a small gangster role. Learning that at Universal the role of the monster in Frankenstein had been refused by Bela Lugosi, who would play no role in which he was unable to use his distinguished voice, Karloff, willing to take anything at that time, accepted the part. The film was a monstrous success for him as well as the producers. It was the beginning of a career that was to label him one of the greatest horror actors in the history of show business. And strangely enough, the name of the actor portraying the Frankenstein monster was omitted in all the advertising and billboards, and a question mark put in its place. It wasn't until later that the actor was given recognition for his classic role. In 1932, Karloff played the role of the sinister butler in Universal's The Old Dark House, as well as the title role in The Mummy. The latter film clearly established the English thespian as one of the greatest masters of the eerie and macabre. Also in 1932, he made an appearance at MGM as the evil Mongolian wizard in The Mask of Fu Manchu. Skipping a year, he returned to Universal in 1934 and co-starred with another great of the horror films, Bela Lugosi, in Edgar Allan Poe's The Black Cat, which because of a later film with the same title, is now known only as The Vanishing Body. In 1935, Karloff again appeared opposite Lugosi in another Poe thriller, The Raven, which borrowed portions of the plot of Poe's Pit and the Pendulum. That same year, Karloff returned to the monster that had given him his first break when he played the role again in The Bride of Frankenstein. The next year, 1936, Karloff and Lugosi teamed up again in The Invisible Ray for Universal. His next picture in 1937, when Universal had just become the new Universal, was Night Key, in which he played the role of a brilliant scientist. And then in 1938, Universal made the longest and most expensive of the Frankenstein series, The Son of Frankenstein, which starred Basil Rathbone as the son of Dr. Frankenstein, and Lugosi as a new character, Igor, a mad shepherd with a broken neck, and Lionel Atwell as Inspector Crow, a police inspector with a wooden arm. Naturally, Karloff played the monster. This time his makeup was superb, and he wore a sheepskin vest over his usual outfit and was voiceless, soulless, and brutal. In 1939, Karloff found himself playing the part of the executioner in Universal's The Tower of London, again co-starring with Basil Rathbone. For this role, Jack Pierce, the makeup master artist, shaved Karloff's head completely and gave him a club foot. Karloff again played with Lugosi in Black Friday as a sort of Jekyll and Hyde with a new twist. This was filmed in 1940. During those years with Universal, he also acted in many pictures for other companies, such as The Black Room for Columbia in 1935, and as a maniacal opera star in Charlie Chan at the Opera In that same year, 1936, he went over to First National, now Warner Brothers, where he emoted in The Walking Dead. Later, in 1938, he went back to Warner Brothers for a single, Invisible Menace. Actually, he was under contract to Columbia when he made Black Friday for Universal because his first picture under the Columbia contract was The Man They Could Not Hang in 1939. However, he was released to Monogram, a small company, where he created another character in 1938, which was to become a series. He played the role of Mr. Wong, the Chinese detective. The first of the series was Mr. Wong, Detective, in 1938, followed by the next year, Mr. Wong in Chinatown, and The Mystery of Mr. Wong. In 1940, Karloff did the last two in the series, Doomed to Die and The Fatal Hour, after which he made a single for Monogram before leaving the studio, and that movie was The Ape, a rather interesting film in its own right. Warner's then gave him a lead in two more films in 1940, the roles of the famous Nazi spy in British intelligence and the condemned prisoner in Devil's Island. Before returning to Columbia to fulfill his contract, he tried a comedy role in the Kay Kaiser production for RKO, You'll Find Out, in which he co-starred with Lugosi again and with Peter Lorre. Returning to Columbia in 1940, he did The Man with Nine Lives and The Man They Could Not Hang. In both films, he played a deranged scientist. Continuing with Columbia in 1941, he made The Devil's Commands, the same sort of role, and another comedy, The Boogeyman Will Get You. In 1944, he returned to Universal for two big ones. The first was The Climax, in which he co-starred with Susanna Foster, known as The Magic Voice, and Turhan Bey. The second film he did for Universal that year was the biggest of them all, The House of Frankenstein, in which he co-starred with many old friends including Lon Chaney, John Carradine, J. Carrol Naish, Lionel Atwill, and George Zucco. He then signed up with RKO and made Isle of the Dead, in which he played a Greek general who was trapped with many others on a burial island during a plague. In the same year, 1945, he played opposite Lugosi in Robert Louis Stevenson's The Body Snatcher. And then in 1946, he made Bedlam for RKO, and the following year, Karloff ended his term with RKO when he played a supporting role with Danny Kaye in The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. And he also played a supporting role with Lucille Ball and George Sanders as a deranged actor in Lured for United Artists. 1948 saw him play the role of an Indian chief in Cecil B. DeMille's Unconquered for Paramount, which starred Gary Cooper and Paulette Goddard. This was his second Technicolor picture, the first being Climax, or The Climax. In 1949, he returned to Universal, where he played the part of Swami Talpur, a phony fortune teller from Brooklyn in Abbott and Costello Meets The Killer. And Boris Karloff's acting career has not by any means been limited to American screens. In the 30s, he made two horror pictures in England, The Juggernaut and The Man Who Lived Again. Both of these were Mad Doctor roles. And he has recently made a British horror film, The Haunted Strangler, which is still playing in English theaters. Remember, this was in 1960. Not many of Mr. Karloff's fans know that he made a serial before playing in the original Frankenstein in 1931. It was called King of the Wild for Mascot Pictures, and in 1953 he played with Bud Abbott and Lou Costello again in the title role of Abbott and Costello Meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde for Universal. Prior to that, Universal starred him in two more horror films, The Strange Door in 1951 with Charles Laughton, and The Black Castle in 1952 with Lon Chaney. Some of Karloff's most recent pictures are Voodoo Island for United Artists in 1956 and his latest, Frankenstein 1970, a modern continuation of the old series. In another medium of show business, Mr. Karloff has had a TV show titled Colonel March of Scotland Yard and another, which never played on TV, called The Veil. Currently, he is the host and occasional star of one of TV's biggest hour-long shows, Thriller. And now, at age 74, and still going strong, the gentleman from England, Boris Karloff, has become a film legend in his own time. End article. Of course, this was done in 1960, and Boris Karloff went on to do other projects in his later years. I hope you enjoyed this short feature, and please subscribe and give a thumbs up and leave your comments in the comments section below. They are always appreciated. God bless and have a great evening.